Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've got some really interesting source material today that you sent over, and we're ready to unpack it. We're diving deep into a guide called The Wife's Demeanor,
Mm.
Kingdom-Oriented Marriage Guide. It's by Maduminsian Gozi Yvonne, published back in 2022. So our goal here is to explore this manual. It gives, really specific, biblically rooted advice on roles and conduct for a wife in what the author calls a kingdom-oriented marriage. It's pretty exhaustive, like a detailed map for a certain view of marriage, getting into almost every little aspect.
Oh, it really is comprehensive. I mean, just glancing at the contents page tells you a lot about the depth. This isn't light reading. There are over 50 specific points or chapters. Seriously, covers everything from like spiritual duties, emotional stuff, managing money, the household,
Right.
even handling arguments. So for you listening, we're essentially trying to boil down what feels like a whole course on a very specific marriage philosophy into this conversation.
Okay, let's dig in. We should probably start where the author does, right? The foundation, scripturally, historically. The text kicks off with Genesis 2, the creation of woman from Adam's rib. And according to this guide, that moment right there establishes the whole one-flesh relationship idea, non-negotiable.
Yeah, and what's interesting right away is how the source dives into the language to define these roles. They really highlight the Hebrew word for wife, isha. They point out it's just the feminine version of ish, which means husband. So the idea is while the roles are different, they share the same origin and essential nature.
Right, that structural definition. But then they add this expressive layer, which is quite striking.
Exactly. The source gives this expressive definition of woman. It says a man with a womb. But it means more than just the physical. Spiritually, intellectually, it suggests sharing the same human qualities, intellect, spirit, but, and this is key, combined with a unique divine ability to conceive, nurture, and bring life creatively, physically, or emotionally. So it's not just about having babies. It positions the wife as the main creative life giver and nurturer in the marriage, different from the husband's role as leader.
Okay, so that foundation is then used to justify all the really specific roles we see later, citing scriptures like Titus 2, 1 Timothy 5, and obviously the big one, Proverbs 31, as the standard for how a wife should act. All right, so we got the foundation. Equal, in essence, maybe, but distinct roles. Let's jump into the main duties. I noticed chapter 1 is titled God First. In this whole kingdom-oriented idea, why is the wife's spiritual duty put so front and center? Even, it seems, above her relationship with her husband sometimes.
Well, it's presented as the absolute top priority. The thinking is the husband provides for the physical stuff, the daily needs, the structure, that sort of thing. But the wife, she's explicitly tasked with nurturing the spiritual atmosphere of the home. It's seen as like her direct contribution to the family's eternal well-being. The guide emphasizes doing this by modeling Christ through a real lived out relationship, not just, going through the motions of religion. And this focus leads to a really interesting concept in the book, quiet influence. The argument is that her consistent, godly character can inspire the whole family without needing to constantly lecture or correct them verbally. It sort of sets the spiritual temperature, you could say. They actually cite 1 Corinthians 7 for this, stressing that the unbelieving husband is sanctified through his wife. So her personal faith is seen as creating this kind of spiritual protection for the family.
Wow, that sounds like it requires a lot of emotional and spiritual grounding, almost like sealing oneself off. Which brings us neatly to chapter 2 and what feels like a bit of a contradiction. Be individual. It says, a good wife maintains her own virtue, her discretion, her character in Christ. Okay, but then the way this individuality is expressed seems immediately tied to intense restraint in protecting the marriage.
Yeah, it's a really interesting tension, isn't it? She's told to be independent-minded, sure, but then right away she's instructed to guard the privacy of her home with wisdom. So that individuality isn't really about expressing herself outwardly to the world. It's channeled inward to make the marriage unit stronger.
The specific bit about discretion is pretty stark. Cannot afford to disclose her husband's private thoughts or their personal issues to others. He even says be mute, keep secrets. I mean, if the goal is individuality, how does the guide square that personal independence with such a strict demand for silence and loyalty?
That's a key point. The guide frames discretion not as being weak, but as showing inner strength. By keeping quiet, protecting secrets, she proves she's trustworthy. It deepens the bond, supposedly. Her strength is shown through self-control and loyalty, not through, say, transparency with friends or family outside the marriage. So she's independent in her faith and mind, maybe, but totally unified with her husband when it comes to protecting the unit's privacy. And if you think about the kingdom-oriented marriage idea, it makes sense they'd want the home to be this secure, sealed unit protected from outside judgment.
That idea of the home as a sealed, safe place. That leads us right into the physical roles, the operational side. Chapter 4, Safe Home.
Right. But first, you have to understand the structure they lay out. The source bases the hierarchy in Genesis 1, mankind's dominion, and Ephesians 5, where the husband is called to lead. So given that leadership structure, the wife's job operationally is defined as subdominion. Mhm. Now, in the guide's view, this isn't about being subservient like a doormat. It's more like delegated authority over the practical side, the keeping and management of the home.
Okay, subdominion. So, husband leads overall, wife manages the home domain. What does that actually look like day to day? Because the guide makes it sound almost like a professional job.
It's intense. Yeah, it covers all the daily stuff. Cooking, cleaning, organizing, shopping, decorating, even making sure the finances are handled well. It's described as a sacred responsibility.
Mm.
And the guide strongly implies that the state of the home directly reflects the wife's inner state. Like, a messy house suggests a lack of spiritual discipline. The goal is to make it peaceful, welcoming, a place where the husband can rest, kids are nurtured properly. It's all very detailed.
And before we got too deep into household management, we skipped chapter 3, which is about physical intimacy. Be chaste. This obviously covers faithfulness, body, mind, heart. It calls marital intimacy a sacred bond, representing love, trust, unity, standard stuff, maybe.
Well, yes, but what I think is important here is the balance it tries to strike. While the wife is expected to be faithful, loyal, attentive, the source quickly adds a reciprocal requirement for true chastity. It says both partners must lovingly consider each other's emotional, mental, and spiritual state before initiating intimacy. So it's an attempt to prevent intimacy from being just physical or selfish. It demands mutual understanding first.
Okay, so moving from the physical demands, the management, the loyalty, to the internal state.
Yeah.
Chapter 5 talks about having a spiritual mind.
Mm-hmm.
And it stresses this isn't just an act, trying to please the husband. It's supposed to be a deep internal commitment rooted in God.
Exactly. It's about building this resilient inner life. A woman with a spiritual mind, according to the source, is expected to live by faith, to make good decisions based on principles, not just fleeting feelings or reacting to every little problem in the relationship.
And this is where you really see the emotional labor spelled out, isn't it? The guide says this mindset means actively choosing grace over pride, peace over conflict, and understanding over self-justification, unquote. It feels like it demands constant self-control. Like, she always has to be the one to maintain peace no matter what's happening.
Pretty much. The goal is presented as selfless service, turning the house into a sanctuary, reflecting, as the guide puts it, heaven's calm. It's about being this constant source of peace and understanding for the family.
You know what really jumps out at me, and I think it would jump out at you, the listener, isn't just these main chapters we've hit. It's the sheer number of specific, tiny behavioral rules listed throughout the whole guide's table of contents. It just shows how huge the scope of this expected demeanor really is.
Oh, absolutely. That's where, the theory meets reality. The spiritual mind is the engine. These are like the detailed operating instructions. Look at the emotional management section. It gets incredibly specific. She's told point blank, never nag. Also, be the calm in his chaos, discover his heart dialect, whatever that means exactly. And crucially, let go of little offenses. I mean, that's a massive amount of emotional regulation required, constantly filtering conflict and personal feelings.
That really sets an extremely high bar for self-control, for deference. But interestingly, the guide also pushes for active relationship building. It tells her to create moments with your husband, date him often, resolve conflicts amicably, ensure there are small gestures, great love. So it's not passive at all. It demands she proactively keeps the relationship healthy.
And remember that intellectual independence we talked about, it pops up again in the personal growth section. She's told to be independent-minded and let your mind keep learning. So even within this structure of huge service and loyalty, the guide says the wife needs to keep growing intellectually. And fascinatingly, also to pamper yourself, which seems like a nod to the fact that this demanding role needs deliberate self-care to avoid burnout.
Right. So if we were to boil it down to synthesize the main takeaways for you listening, this guide really sets up the wife as the absolute core nurturer of the spiritual home and the main manager of the physical house. It's a framework that demands incredibly high levels of loyalty, discretion, constant self-mastery, proactive effort, all grounded in her relationship with God first. It's a very active, very comprehensive role, absolutely central to this specific kingdom-oriented family structure.
Yeah, the complexity, I think, is in balancing that spiritual power she's given the quiet influence, the potential to sanctify with the prescribed role in the physical hierarchy, that subdominion.
Hmm.
It sounds like a constant balancing act requiring immense intentionality.
Exactly. It's a huge weight of responsibility placed right there. So maybe a final thought for you to mull over based on the source. Given that the guide really stresses the wife's individuality and her need to keep learning, but at the same time, it demands she keep sacred the intimate matters of her family life and literally keep secrets. What kind of internal tension might that create? That push and pull between needing deep discretion and maintaining her own independent mind and spirit. Something to think about after this deep dive.